Hey guys, what's up? I'm CJ and welcome back to my galaxy. Today we're talking about Katniss, the Hunger Games, and whether or not Katniss is aromantic and or asexual. So today's going to be like a little bit of a sit down chatting kind of video, and I wanted to offer like a few warnings or disclaimers before this video. First of all, we're talking about queer identity, and I'm going to give a definition about it in a minute, but that means there's obviously a lot of hate that goes around on the internet. So any hate that I see in the comments, your comment will be immediately deleted, and I don't really care about your comment because screw you and your harassment. I'm gonna not put up with it. And I've also, on a different note, have also made a video about this in the past, about queer identities in the Hunger Games universe. It was actually with Rachel from AngstyAce. I've done that before, and I've kind of wanted to touch more onto that idea in this video today. Just a bit of a conversation, basically saying like, these are my ideas. Now, you guys tell me your ideas in return, and just in the comment section, just let me know your thoughts. And before anyone says stuff about my thoughts on Sunrise on the Reaping in the comments, like, can't wait to see your thoughts. When is it coming out? It's coming out next week. Okay? So everyone calm down. My thoughts on Sunrise on the Reaping are coming, but we are talking about Katniss. Just Katniss today and the original trilogy. I have my notes. So basically, what is aromantic and what is asexual? So aromantic is little to no romantic attraction, and then asexual is defined as little to no sexual attraction. And I think a lot of people recently have been adding on the two others to the definition, so little to no romantic or sexual attraction to others, to describe the identity. So there's also a thing called microlabels, and microlabels is basically where the headcanon for Katniss is coming from. Microlabels are like, basically, there's like a whole spectrum of aromantic and asexual people. One microlabel is demiromantic. So demiromantic means that you don't experience romantic attraction until you have an emotional connection with someone. Same goes for demisexual. So you don't have sexual attraction to someone without an emotional connection first. And I personally, I'm demiromantic asexual, and that means I don't experience romantic attraction until I'm emotionally connected to someone, and I don't feel sexual attraction. So if you guys didn't know, I'm queer. Fun fact. I've mentioned it on my channel before. I've never really had like a coming out, but you know, the reason I'm so, into the topic of Katniss being aromantic and asexual and her headcanons is because that's my identity. And Katniss is headcanon to be demisexual and or demiromantic. You'll see more often than not her being described as demisexual. A lot of people actually miss out on aromantic identities. It's one of the lesser known, like people know about asexuality, but not aromanticism. So if you're ever talking about being aromantic or someone being aromantic, just don't forget if they're asexual, not aromantic, or maybe they're aromantic and not asexual. Okay, so now that we're done with the definitions, where am I getting the idea, or where are the people who have headcanon Katniss as ARAS, short for aromantic asexual, where are they getting the idea from? And it's kind of from several different areas, and it really depends on what kind of context clues you're looking for and what kind of representation you're kind of looking for as well. There's something called queer codes, if you guys haven't heard of it. It's like, it can go for basically any kind of like marginalized community. So it's like whatever marginalized community codes. So in this case, queer codes or ARAS codes. And you're kind of reading in between the lines. And when it comes to the Hunger Games, what we're reading into is Katniss and Peeta's relationship, as well as Katniss and Gale's relationship. It's basically Katniss's inner monologue going on here. So Katniss doesn't consider romantic relationships with anyone unless it's kind of put onto her. So Gale at the beginning of the Hunger Games, for example, he says that he would want to get married and have kids at some point. And they're talking about basically running away at the beginning of the very first novel, and Katniss has never really thought about it. It's more about the fact that she's been expected, that the District 12, she thinks that District 12 expects her to marry Gale because that's just what she's supposed to do. There's no feelings behind it. And that isn't, and when she's thinking about Gale in the arena, when she's playing up this romance with Peeta, it isn't like feelings behind it. It's more like, what was she supposed to be doing? She's supposed to have feelings for Gale. What does Gale think? You know, it's not about her own feelings per se. And then it comes to Peeta and Katniss's feelings for Peeta. And she doesn't actually legitimately have feelings for Peeta until further into the first book. I think you could argue that she has attraction for Peeta later on in the first novel, but you don't really see it until Catching Fire, and Katniss herself doesn't realize it until Mockingjay. If you're reading the first Hunger Games novel, you'll notice that Katniss is kind of the whole romance thing is foreign to her, and a lot of you can probably argue the fact that she's a teenager and she's only just starting to learn how these kinds of relationships are. But the thing is, I also had the same experiences as a teenager, and it wasn't the same experience that everyone else was having around me. It was foreign, but in a different way. Like, the feeling was, I don't even know how to describe it. It's because if it's a feeling that you haven't had before, it's like, how do you describe it when everyone's telling you how it's supposed to feel and it feels different for you? Like, so many people in the community, and like myself as well, Katniss describes like romance coming so easily to other girls her age, which is very like indicative of the fact that she doesn't feel the same way about people as everyone else around her. It's not about the fact that she's a teenager, it's about the fact of who she is and how she feels as a person and what that attraction is, right? So when it comes to Peeta, she's modeling her behavior around the other relationships she's seen around her before. So she uses the example of her mother and her father, and she models the way she treats Peeta after that, because it's unnatural to her, and because she doesn't have like those feelings. And it isn't until later in the novel, and people bring this up all the time, and I find it so funny when people bring this up. It's Katniss speaks about her attraction to Peeta as a hunger, because it's like the Hunger Games, so it makes sense. And obviously you guys knew that. Why did I have to describe it to you? But you know, she describes it as a hunger, and then we know that she's experiencing attraction towards Peeta after that. So her feelings for him have changed. And she doesn't describe it as that until she gets to know Peeta, because we know that Peeta knew who Katniss was, and he saved her from dying, and they knew each other kind of as acquaintances rather than actually friends. And it isn't until she tells stories about, or they exchange stories, right? Peeta tells Katniss how he like fell in love with her, and that was when Katniss got up in the middle of a school parade and sang a song. I don't remember what song it was. I think it was the Valley song. And then Katniss tells Peeta about how she bought Prim's goat, Lady, and how that affected her, and how that was one of her happiest memories. And it isn't until then she starts to experience attraction to Peeta. She doesn't quite realize it, and I would put that much up to her being a teenager and her also having this survival instinct that she can't really think about being in a relationship with someone, especially in that way, because she has like all of this responsibility on her shoulders. So she doesn't really think about it much, and it isn't until Mockingjay, and it isn't until Finnick points it out to her that she realizes maybe she should reconsider the fact that she does have feelings for Peeta. Another very good example of it is actually Catching Fire, that we see them starting to grow an emotional connection before Katniss is willing to see any sort of like future with Peeta, and willing to put that survival instinct aside to make sure that Peeta survives, because she loves him and she cares for him. And we see that emotional connection on the Victory Tour. The Victory Tour being that they were always sleeping in the same bed, and, you know, Peeta was helping her with her nightmares, and coincidentally, Katniss was helping Peeta with his nightmares, since his nightmares were always about losing Katniss. And I smile, even though it's like really bad that he was nervous about that. And That's bad. But also really cute that he cared that much about her. So, yes. Smiling, laughing at it? No. Trauma. It's bad. Anyway, moving on. They grow a close emotional bond, especially when Peeta says that he wants to stop acting so wounded so they can actually try to be friends, even though they're trying to fake being in a relationship and convince Snow that they are actually star-crossed lovers, very in love, and that they were going to eat those berries because they couldn't imagine living without each other. You know, the whole survival thing, and not resulting in a rebellion for Panem. So the two of them grow this emotional connection, and that's when Katniss begins to realize that she has feelings for Peeta and she's actually attracted to him. And then we have that whole famous kissing, making out scene in, I don't know what to call it. I think the beach scene, that one, the beach scene in Catching Fire. That's when we have the beach scene. And I like to believe personally that Peeta knew that it was real, that kiss. Just personally, I know you guys like to imagine that too. And I'm going to continue thinking that Peeta actually believed that. Even though in Mockingjay, he doesn't really know for sure if it was real, but he knows deep down that it was real. And I hold on to that. So you can't take it away from me, okay? So it leads to the whole beach scene and the whole description. And I don't have my book on me right now. Where's my Catching Fire book? It's on my shelf. Where is that way? There's my Catching Fire book. Do I want to get it out? Not particularly. It's the beach scene, you'll know. She talks about hunger and talking, if I remember correctly, she says she thinks she's somewhat of an expert of hunger, but this is an entirely new type of hunger. So she's kind of learning. She's a teenager, but at the same time, she didn't feel that attraction until she actually had an emotional connection with Peeta, which essentially makes her demiromantic and demisexual at the same time. It makes her kind of both of those micro labels, because the emotional connection is what brings on that attraction. Do you guys get it? I hope so. I hope you guys agree with me, because my evidence is solid. I hope. No, I'm persuading you. You guys, there's an emotional connection here. And there's no attraction without that emotional connection. Because if you look at the beginning of the first book, she doesn't have any feelings and it's completely foreign to her. I have more notes though. More notes to support my theory, and they're about Gale. I know, you're all groaning in the background going, not Gale. Don't make us think about Gale. Not the Prim Reaper. So, okay. I'm laughing at myself and my own jokes because I'm that funny. Katniss is only with Gale to fill a void she doesn't understand. In Mockingjay, Gale is barely in the first two books, and I don't understand how it was a question of Team Gale versus Team Peeta, because it was never a question at all. It was Peeta because Gale's barely in it. And I think that's where the aromantic and asexual side comes in, because Katniss is fighting this instinct of like, what is she supposed to feel? What is she supposed to do? You know, so which is why Gale comes up in her mind, is like she's like developing these feelings for Peeta in a way that she doesn't hear like the other girls her age in school like thinking like or talking like or whatever. And she's supposed to be with Gale. You know, the conventional life, the traditional life that everyone else, I just bumped my camera. Anyway, the traditional life that everyone is living is Gale. And in Mockingjay, like I said earlier, in Mockingjay, she is in District 2 with Gale, and I think she's like in the woods of District 2 making out with Gale. And she's not talking about her feelings towards Gale. She's talking about filling this void of loneliness, and that's the only reason she's with him. And she doesn't have feelings for him. She doesn't feel that emotional connection to Gale. And this is also an argument for Team Peeta. Because how could you be Team Gale? How is that even possible to be Team Gale? He's barely in the novels. Barely in the... Anyway. You know, this emotional connection that she used to have with Gale didn't bring up any attraction to him, that she didn't think of him in that way. It was only in like a social expectation way up until District 2 and up until Mockingjay, when she wanted to fill the void of loneliness, which even then wasn't even an attraction to him. It was just like this emotional connection we have. You know, there's no attraction because I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, which is something that the queer community as a whole experiences. Like, you're playing on social expectation and what you're supposed to be doing, and you're constantly trying to fill that void of loneliness when you can't, because in doing so and filling that void, you're not acting like yourself, which is exactly what Katniss is doing. She's not acting like herself, because the reason she's in District 2 is to avoid the reality that Peeta has been hijacked by the Capitol. So she's avoiding these feelings for him and the idea of Peeta, and trying to reject the notion that she had accepted her feelings for Peeta and had that understanding of her feelings, which is like a relief to so many AngstyAce people out there when you finally figure out your feelings, and then you go, do I have to like question micro labels now? Do I have to figure that out? Do I even want labels? So you figure that out. And then like there's a whole different point of view that you have to consider as well. You know, in Katniss's world, she's accepted the feelings, and now she has to figure out her position in the world and where the social expectation lies in the middle of a war zone. You know, people like me living in Australia, I'm not in the middle of a war zone. I'm not figuring out my like social expectations in the middle of like a war. Thank God. You know, like, makes it a lot easier, to say the least. I went on a little tangent there, but you know, like, my point being there is that you're trying to figure out this social expectation after figuring out where you fit with your identity and your sexuality and your feelings and attraction towards people. And then someone like Gale pops up and you go, am I just with this person because I feel like I should be, not because I actually want to be? So Team Peeta all the way, because Katniss being with Peeta is her accepting her feelings and how she is actually attracted to people. Those are basically my thoughts on Katniss being AngstyAce. I've given you guys lots of ideas to play with, to understand, to take in. Maybe you guys don't agree with me. As long as you're respectful in the comment section, I don't mind if you guys disagree with me. Maybe you think she's gay for whatever reason, I don't know. You know, I'm always willing to hear out like a really obscure headcanon. I know there are a lot of actual queer characters that are explicitly queer in the Hunger Games. There's not a lot of them actually, but there are some characters, especially in Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I'm pretty sure there's 2 lesbian characters. I think like in the Covey, Lucy Ray's cousins, I think they're not like cousins with each other, but like, you know what I mean? They're in the Covey and they're together and they're 2 women. I think. I need to reread that book. I know they're gay in some way. I just don't remember the gender of them. But the Hunger Games is queer. And Katniss is demiromantic / demisexual. She's trying to sum up my points and my little rant. She's trying to fill a void and fill that social expectation she feels the need to fulfill with Gale. And Peeta is the actual reality of her attraction to people, and that is Team Peeta versus Team Gale, and I am always going to be Team Peeta, no matter what. If there's anyone who's still Team Gale out there, what the hell are you doing? After reading Mockingjay, how dare you think of it like that? Don't even talk to me about the Prim Reaper. Hopefully you guys agree with me, but let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. You know, is there any queer characters in the Hunger Games that you really, you know, are there headcanons? Are they explicit like Songbirds and Snakes? Let me know. And what do you think is like queer codes in the Hunger Games as well? I would love to know your thoughts on today's video, just in general. is Katniss demiromantic / demisexual? Is she like aromantic asexual? Is she a different micro label that I haven't mentioned in the video? You know, there's so many different micro labels. If you haven't heard of micro labels before, you know, it's a very big rabbit hole to go down. You don't need to label yourself, but you know, just consider the fact that it's a massive rabbit hole to go down if you're like even remotely interested. But at the end of the day, I hope you guys learn a little bit about being aromantic and asexual, you know, from someone who's AngstyAce herself, you know, like personal experience and all that. So that is it for today's video. If you guys enjoyed, please like and subscribe, and obviously comment down below your thoughts on today's video. Once again, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video, but I've been CJ, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.